This is ClueCon Weekly, the official FreeSWITCH web show produced and broadcasted directly from FreeSWITCH. ClueCon Weekly features live updates from the FreeSWITCH developers and presentations from various pioneers of communications technology. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions, the official consulting firm of the FreeSWITCH open source project. Get help from the experts. Visit freeswitch.com. ClueCon, the premier technology conference for telecom, WebRTC, IoT, and all things maker. ClueCon is held every year in Chicago, Illinois, and offers an all-day hackathon and 4 days of technology-rich presentations from developers around the world. Learn more at ClueCon.com or call 877-748-CLUE.
All right, guys, welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is December 7th, and we'll have Matthew Hodgson from Matrix.org joining us. He's got some cool new stuff with Matrix he's going to be showing off. But before we get to that, I think we've got Miss Kathleen King with the Week in Review. How are you doing this week, Kathleen?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Ken. This week, Mod V8 added implemented native PostgreSQL in JavaScript support. So go check that out. That's kind of cool, especially for those of you who like to play with the databases. And as for announcements, ClueCon registration is open, so head over to ClueCon.com, click that beautiful orange button, get yourself registered. Get it out of the way. You don't have to think about it. It's done. And it gives us an idea of what to expect for this upcoming ClueCon 2017. And then for those of you who don't know, FreeSWITCH team hosts a bug hunt on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Central Time. We host this gathering right here in the public conference bridge. And we use this time to address bugs in FreeSWITCH, community questions, work on the code a little bit. So this is a great time for community members to come and join us. You can ask your questions, help out by testing some code. We can help you, file bug reports or things like that. So join us by dialing 888 at conference.freeswitch.org/VC. Or if you're in the U.S., you can call 1-919-386-9900. And then we'll also be hosting our Friday free-for-all. Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Time. Join us, hang out, call in, stay connected. Join our HipChat channels. That's a great way to talk to us. We are all there, all connected in real time. HipChat.freeswitch.org. For those of you who prefer IRC, pound FreeSWITCH. And be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for both @FreeSWITCH and @ClueCon for all the latest and greatest announcements. And that's it for me, Ken.
All right, cool. Thanks very much, Kathleen. And don't forget, guys, Kathleen mentioned that registration is open for ClueCon. Don't forget that sponsor registration is open too. So if you want to sponsor ClueCon, email marketing@ClueCon.com. And get in touch with the team. You'll get in touch with Kathleen and Brian and the rest of the team that's handling the sponsors for that, and get the information that you need to get started now. There's a lot of cool opportunities there this year. I think we've got a bunch of new opportunities there, so definitely you want to get that in early, as people are already starting to get those slots. So get those in there today. And don't forget, if you haven't upgraded yet, last week we released FreeSWITCH 1.6.13. There's a bunch of fixes in there, a lot of fax fixes, so you want to get those if you do a lot of T38 faxing, plus a whole bunch of other fixes in various areas. So check that out today. That's available on all the normal download sites. So we've got Matthew Hodgson. If you guys aren't familiar with Matthew, he's been working on Matrix for quite a while. And they've got a bunch of cool stuff going there. Matrix, if you're not familiar with it, and Matthew can tell you a lot more about it than I can, is I want to say an IM communications platform that's federated. It's got a whole bunch of cool features. It even uses FreeSWITCH for doing video teleconferencing kind of thing. So, Matthew, how are you doing today, sir?
Hi, Ken. I'm doing very well, I think. Am I coming in okay?
Oh, yeah, you're coming in great. So, tell everybody a little bit more about yourself and about Matrix, and then, just go ahead and get in, because I know you've got some a cool new feature that you want to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Ken. Thanks, Kathleen, for inviting me back on the show. It's a pleasure, as always, to be here. And Matrix itself, well, as you say, we've been doing it a while now. We've been doing it since September of 2014, so we're just over 2 years old at this point. And it's kind of probably more than an instant messaging platform. We think of it as it's an open standard for communication, like SIP or XMPP, and it really is derived for many years that we spent building SIP, soft switches and infrastructure, and running XMPP gateways, and wondering what the world would look like if there was a standard HTTP protocol that people could use for signaling. And that could be setting up VoIP calls, or synchronizing messages in chat rooms, or really synchronizing any kind of data around the internet. And so the whole point of Matrix is to publish a standard which goes and describes what an API could look like, that lets anybody go and publish JSON data, cryptographically sign it, and then replicate it across other servers. So conceptually, if you're familiar with how Git works as a version control system, or how blockchain works for things like Bitcoin, it's really the same type of technology, but applied to real-time communication. So if I was going to be setting up a VoIP call to you, Ken, and you were running a Matrix server over at FreeSWITCH.org, then I could go and take the SDP that describes the invite of the session of the call that I'm setting up, and I'll do an HTTP put to put it onto my server. It would then sign it and send it over to your server via HTTP, and then you would receive it onto your Matrix client, or onto FreeSWITCH for that matter, via HTTP GET. And FreeSWITCH, in fact, can then be used to go and convert from the Matrix protocol into SIP, or H.323, or ISDN, or whatever other protocol obviously is out there. There isn't a native Matrix mod yet for FreeSWITCH, but we do provide a Matrix app service, Verto, that converts through between the Verto-based WebSockets and protocol that FreeSWITCH already talks, and the HTTP Matrix protocol that the rest of Matrix talks. So we really think of it as almost being like an evolution of the web. It's obviously built on HTTP, and the web was originally meant to be a read and write environment, but obviously it evolved so that people would publish data in different ways, but you could always read it in the same way. Whereas in Matrix, we're letting you both publish and receive data, and you're doing it in real time, and it's aggressively decentralized so that there isn't any single point of controlling these conversations. So that's a slightly wordy explanation of what Matrix is, and people are using it now for lots of instant messaging as a kind of evolution of IRC. We've got 500,000 users on the matrix.org server, but we're also seeing over 1,000 deployments out there of other people running their own servers. We see about 50,000 rooms on, again, visible to the matrix.org server, but there are lots of other people getting involved in it. And some of the more interesting news we've seen in the community uptake recently have been people like Ericsson actually launching commercial products now on top of Matrix, showing that it isn't just us and a bunch of open source hippies going and doing fun stuff on top of Matrix. It's actually being used by pretty big and serious companies in production now. So that's sort of where Matrix is at. Did that make sense?
Oh yeah, perfect. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense and everything. And I know I've watched you guys over the past year or so completely grow what Matrix is, and even played with some of it. So it's actually really, really cool. So I know that you guys just added something new in that I think a lot of people are really going to like. What did you guys add?
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks for the question. Good question, Ken. So it's in some ways the most important thing that we've added yet into Matrix, and for ages it was the biggest, biggest omission, and it's end-to-end encryption. So especially for the Matrix architecture, it's critical that the conversation history, whether it's VoIP signaling or chat history or whatever, is encrypted on the servers. Because if you had, I don't know, 100 people in a room, and that room is replicated over 10 different servers, then if you are just storing the neat conversation data on those 10 servers, then that's a huge privacy risk. as in any of those administrators could start reading the history of what was going on those rooms. And if it's a private conversation, that's not cool at all. So with end-to-end encryption, we've gone and taken the very best stuff we could find out there, which is what Signal was using from Open Whisper systems. And it's the technology that's been adopted subsequently by WhatsApp and Google Allo and Facebook Messenger and all of these other systems which have kind of secret conversation modes. And we've gone and added it into Matrix. It's not actually an implementation of what Signal does. Instead, what we did was to take the core algorithm, which is called the double ratchet. It used to originally be called axolotl after the Mexican salamander, but nowadays it's called double ratchet. We took the algorithm that the guys at Open Whisper Systems, Moxie, Marlon, Spike, and Trevor Perry had gone and published a sketch for basically explaining how it works. And we implemented our own version of it in C and C++ 11, but nowadays it's almost all plain C. And we called it OLM because OLM, OLM, that is, OLM, is a European salamander that you find in certain cave systems in Central Europe. So basically, we've been working on this for 2 years. Throughout the history of Matrix, we knew we needed it from the outset, so we got working on it, and it kind of developed in stops and starts because honestly, the core Matrix functionality often took priority. But over the last 6-7 months, we finally piled on and basically had a large amount of the team working on finishing off the cryptographic ratchet of OLM, and then subsequently an entirely new ratchet that we've developed called MegOLM, which is what Matrix is actually using now for all of its group conversations. And it's been an interesting ride because it's obviously bleeding edge stuff, and we've been implementing it from scratch. We've learned a lot of stuff as we went, and really interestingly, we got funded by the Open Technology Fund in the US to go and get it audited by cryptography experts, because you really don't want to be pushing out this sort of stuff without having proper professional cryptographers looking over it and finding vulnerabilities and giving their opinion. And so throughout, I think it was throughout September, we spent a few weeks with the guys from NCC Group Crypto Services, who I think used to be called ISEC, who are basically the world leaders in end-to-end encryption auditing. They were the guys, I believe, who audited Signal and Tor and a bunch of other very high-profile, privacy-aware cryptography products. And they spent, as I say, a few weeks working on it with us and tearing it apart. And the good news is that they didn't find that much, but the stuff that they did find was pretty exotic and special edge cases that we genuinely had missed. And we were very, very glad to have this professional audit done on both the OLM layer and the MegOLM layer. I think the findings in the end was that we had one high risk vulnerability, one medium one, and a bunch, probably 6, I think, low ones and a couple of informational ones. And certainly the high one that they found is what's called an unknown key share attack, where you have to have a particularly interesting collusion between various different parties who have compromised various different devices and servers at different points in order to end up being able to intercept a room. But it was classed in the end as a high-risk attack because it did actually let them go and infiltrate the room if you had the correct combination of collusion. And honestly, we missed it entirely, so it was great that they pulled it out. And obviously, we then went through fixing the various vulnerabilities that they'd found or mitigating them. A lot of that fixing happened at the matrix layer rather than the OLM layer, because a lot of the issues that they found with the cryptography were actually features in the library. So to explain this a bit better, there are 2 different ratchets here. There's OLM and MegOLM. Now, OLM is basically the same as axolotl or the double ratchet. And what it does is to provide a secure one-to-one conversation between a pair of devices. And it's very cool because you have two different ratchets which are generating new cryptographic keys that both the sender and the receiver keep in sync. So rather than having a single password or a single key which is shared between the participants, instead you have what's called the ratchet state, and every new message that gets sent gets an entirely new key assigned to it, and the ratchet can only generate keys in a forwards direction, like a mechanical ratchet. So if you steal a key from somebody, okay, you might be able to progress the ratchet forwards if you also have the rest of the information about the ratchet, but you should never be able to reverse and start decrypting past history, which is quite a big deal. And the way that the double ratchet works is that you have two of these ratchets, one which is done for adjacent messages in a conversation, so that if a user keeps sending messages in a row, so like I'm on this huge monologue right now, sorry Ken, I'm just talking and talking and talking, that every new sentence, every new message I would send would be an advance in the same ratchet. But if you interrupted me right now, then you would be creating a new high level ratchet to start off the new kind of talk spurt of messages which were coming from your side of the conversation. And there are two different mechanisms for this. The keys which I generate as I'm talking for each new message is advancing a relatively straightforward HMAC key derivation function ratchet, creating basically a new hash which keeps being recalculated with some random data in order to go and keep advancing it. Sorry, without random data. However, if you started a new, if you interrupted me now, then our clients would go and negotiate a new key exchange effectively to go and set up and advance a new ratchet, which we would then agree on, which would allow you to start talking to me. So you've basically got two different levels of protection going on here, and it's orders of magnitude more secure and safe than the traditional TLS style network layer encryption, where you would have or transport layer security, I should say, where you basically are secured by a single certificate, a single long-lived key for a server or a client or a conversation. So the keys keep on basically being regenerated, and that's what the Olm layer does. And that's what things like Signal use, along with a bunch of other stuff under the hood. The problem is that in the end, it's essentially a one-to-one system. And in Matrix, everything is group conversation. And we've got rooms with 6,000, 7,000 people in it. I think the largest room we've seen so far has now got 70,000 users in it, which is a bridge through to a bunch of different C community IRC channels. And there's just loads of people in there from different directions. And naively, you could encrypt the message n times each for all the different people who are in the room, but that's going to scale horrifically. That's what we did originally about a year ago when we were prototyping it, but we needed to do something better, and that's where MegOlm came from. And the thing that MegOlm also adds not only is group conversation, but the ability to share room history between devices if you want. And this is where we got into trouble, in fact, with the audit, or not trouble, but this is where there was some confusion, shall we say, on the audit. Because we consider it a feature in Matrix that if you want to configure a room that you can share the history of that room with new devices, then you can. And this is a big deal because it's a very usable thing. If I buy a new iPhone, and in fact today I got myself an iPhone 7 Plus, they do exist folks, this is what they look like, and I've got my old 6 Plus, then obviously it's a no-brainer that I want to synchronize the history from my device here onto the new one. But if we were being rabidly concerned about end-to-end encryption, that would constitute an attack. The fact that I've stolen the history and the encryption keys from my old device is possibly a vulnerability, because if I were an attacker, I could be maliciously using it to steal the history of the room. So in Matrix, we go and make it an option. You can configure the room so that you can never sync history to new devices, or in the near future, we'll be able to configure the room so that you can go and deliberately share some of the old history with new devices for convenience. And depending on how sensitive the room is, that's either good or bad thing. And basically the problem is that because we support this deliberately flexible security in the encryption library, technically from an auditor's perspective, that looks like it could be a vulnerability, because it could be used maliciously if an application got it wrong and went and shared history to the wrong person. So basically a bunch of the issues that they found in the audit revolved around the fact that we were being a bit more flexible and we weren't being completely tinfoil hat focused on privacy at whatever the cost to usability, but instead trying to provide users with a dial so that they can configure how secure or otherwise the system is. So those are basically the big novelties of Megolm. Technically speaking, the way it works is that Megolm introduces another ratchet, which is shared over all of the participants in the room effectively, so that every person has their own ratchet as they speak in the room, and they encrypt messages with the keys generated from the ratchet, and everybody else keeps track of the ratchet so that they can decrypt it too. Sounds sensible, except you need a way to securely transfer the ratchet information between the various participants in the room so that they can synchronize their watches and everybody can be on the same kind of copy of the ciphers for today, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And to do that, we use Olm. So we've ended up with this multi-level system where the key exchange and the ratchet data exchanging is happening over these super secure one-to-one channels, which is using the double ratchet technology from OpenWhisper systems. And then separately, the actual ratchet that's used for the group conversations is this Megolm thing, which is it's much simpler, honestly, in that it's just everybody having their own ratchet. It doesn't have the self-healing properties of the underlying ratchet, but in exchange, you have the ability to deliberately share history when you want. So we think we get best of both worlds. Plus, we always have the option of falling back to the one-to-one encryption that we have through the main double ratchet. So, apologies for talking for about 20 minutes. Hopefully that gave some useful information as to where our encryption is right now. And did that make any sense?
Yeah, actually it does. So you guys have come up with a super secure end-to-end encryption mechanism that really keeps snoopers out. I mean, we've seen the number one problem in network security from a corporate perspective is not external attacks, it's always internal attacks. I mean, we can name several instances where that's true. I mean, there was a guy that just got busted for securities fraud because he was stealing a public company CEO email because he was an SA and had access to that CEO's email box. So, that's a valid, attack point to be worried about. On the other hand, though, I got a question for you, Matthew. You said that this is getting deployed out there into corporations and stuff like that. Have you guys done anything for legitimate key recovery, like legal request, or what's your thoughts on that kind of thing? So there's a lot of rules that corporations and stuff have to follow along that line.
Yeah, for sure. It's a real tricky balance to get right, because obviously we want to basically empower users to have the level of privacy that they need. So if you were an individual wanting to talk to your partner or your family or whatever, then you should be able to have a room and have total control over the keys and the history, and you could choose to make that history replayable or not using the usability stuff I mentioned earlier. Now, the same mechanisms there which you can use to replay history to a new device could also conceivably be used to go and share the keys to your history with some kind of, I don't know what the right expression is, for kind of lawful intercept uses, or for, internal compliance purposes. So for your enterprise example, where the sysadmin stealing the CEO's email, then, okay, obviously that's not ideal, and obviously the communication should have been end-to-end encrypted in the first place, so that the guy with the IMAP store is just looking at PGP data, or in our instance, the guy with the Matrix home server is just looking at Olm encrypted data. But from a compliance perspective, it could well be that a industry regulator needs to be able to come in and ask for an audit and find out what the hell the CEO's been doing and where all the money's been embezzled and everything else that might be going on. And so then, yeah, you do need the ability to be able to share the session information, or the session keys, and that would basically be up to the application being used. The server can't do it because the server does not have access to any of the key data. That's the whole point of end-to-end encryption. But if you were a company or possibly a telco or somebody shipping an app based on Matrix that was using the OM security, and you did need to comply with whatever legislation is relevant to your enterprise or your country or your industry or whatever it is, then yeah, you would end up needing to write an app which had the ability to somehow surrender that key data to the necessary authorities. That's not something we've done. It's not something that's in any of the apps built on Matrix that I'm aware of, at least. And it's something that certainly for apps like Riot, which is currently the flagship Matrix client out there, which anybody can get from riot.im right now. If you can look at the codes and it's all open source and see that the key data is certainly not leaving the machine at all. But it's not inconceivable that other people will end up writing apps which have some kind of compliance mechanism built into that. And Megolm does support it at the protocol level, just as it would support the ability to share key information with a new device, so I can migrate from my 6 Plus to my 7 Plus.
Cool. Yeah, I was just wondering about that because, we see a lot of stuff going on in the market segment on that right now. There's definitely, times where what I say to somebody else is nobody else's business. But then in the corporate environment, we have things like Sarbanes-Oxley and this, that, and the other that say you got to log all this stuff for security fraud and this, that, and the other. So just to make sure that I understand what you said there, is the server doesn't care at that point. It's up to the client application to cache that data and make it surrenderable.
Yep, precisely.
Cool.
And certainly something that we're looking at is how to handle the problem of backing up your key data. And that's a big deal. Right now, in the beta that we've been running since November the 23rd or 4th, when we launched end-to-end encryption, we don't back up key data. And if, for instance, you log in on a web browser, have a bunch of encrypted conversations, and then log out, well, the logout button obviously deletes all of your personal information, including your key data, and you lose the history for those conversations unless they were also being synced to a different device at the time. And by far, the biggest negative feedback we've had from the beta is people saying, oh my God, I clicked log out and I lost all my history. Well, we're kind of saying, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the architecture right now. But half an hour before we started talking in here, I was literally sitting down with Rich van der Hoff, who's the lead developer on the crypto at the moment, and we were trying to work out what we should do for backing this stuff up. Should we just store it, encrypt it with a passphrase and store it to a file, which you can do relatively okay on a web browser, but is more of a pain on iOS and Android? Or should we encrypt it with a passphrase and then put it on the server? Except then, if somebody did shoulder surf the passphrase or put a keylogger on you, not only they can then just lift all of the key information and compromise your entire account on the server, which doesn't sound particularly ideal. But the same mechanisms that we work out for how to basically store and persist the encrypted session details, or the session key data, I should say, is going to be the same kind of mechanism that you would use in a SOX or whatever regulatory environment to surrender that information to the authorities when needed. But in the end, it's always going to be up to the client to behave well on that.
All right, hold on 1 second for me, Matthew.
Sure.
Actually, I have a question in the meantime.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've already answered this, but what was or what would you say the biggest challenge you faced in trying to get all of this sorted and up and running was?
Yeah, sure. Well, at first it was finding time to work on it relative to building out the rest of Matrix. But then once we did have the core stuff in place, it's on probably the two hardest things are actually the user experience, because the success or failure of crypto is a lot more about how you expose it to the user than anything else. I mean, you can give them the most secure thing in the world, like PGP was 15 years ago, and nobody uses it because the usability is so terrible, and terrifying and terrible. And so that is something we really wanted to avoid, but honestly, the UX is still very much a work in progress. So, for instance, we track the encryption per device in Matrix. It's not done per user. So this is good because it means I can tell precisely what devices I'm talking to on your side and whether I trust them. So if I wanted to send you a message, but I didn't want it to come up on the iPad sitting on the sofa at home or something, then I have the ability to block the iPad and only send it to a particular device. And that kind of flexibility, which from a power user geek perspective is hopefully awesome, but relative to iMessage and WhatsApp, where you just blindly trust it to be somehow giving you privacy, it's not quite so great. Likewise, we have big problems on how to actually verify devices. Right now, we're comparing fingerprints, which means that we'd phone each other up or go and hang out in person and compare hexadecimal numbers off the respective phones to check that they are the right device. And it's terrible UX. So we need to instead do something like scanning QR codes or reading out passphrases or something to trying to verify whose devices are whose. We might also need to cross-sign devices and say that, hey, my 7 Plus has been validated as belonging to me by me on my 6 Plus. And we haven't done that yet either. So really the hard stuff here is all of these fiddly bits of UX to try to make it as silent and as polished as possible. I didn't write the crypto, so it's easy for me to say that the actual cryptography is easy. It's just a matter of maths and calculating hash functions and doing a trippy Diffie-Hellman handshake and all that sort of thing. But in reality, the challenge is very much how you expose it to the user. Also, the audit was fun because they were finding weird and wonderful edge cases that we had to fix, and that was kind of scary. But I would say that was probably more fun than challenging in the end, hopefully.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Becky. So, does anybody have any questions for Matthew? Now's a good time to probably get those in.
Well, as we wait for questions, I can just say one other thing quickly, which is that Olm itself is a library, libOlm, and it's not remotely specific to Matrix. It's developed as a free-form Apache licensed end-to-end encryption library, and it's basically the only Apache licensed end-to-end encryption library out there at the moment, I believe. There are a couple of GPL ones like libsignal itself and Proteus from Wire. But and there are ones which are built into other projects like Pond and GNU-net. I think we're the only Apache licensed one right now. So if you did want a permissive licensed end-to-end encryption library for whatever usage, and it might be encrypting SIP, it might be encrypting Virtu, then Olm is there for the whole community to go wild with. And in fact, the XMPP guys have already picked it up as a way to do more flexible and permissive end-to-end encryption in XMPP, which is great for us because there's obviously a lot of overlap between the Jabber and XMPP community and what we're doing with Matrix, and it's been really nice to be able to help them out a bit by releasing this and having them build on top of it.
Cool, that's pretty cool. And so for grabbing the code for either Matrix or Ohm or any of that, where can people find that if they want to go poke at it?
Sure. So all of the Matrix stuff can be found at matrix.org itself. And the Ohm repository is unusual in that it's not on GitHub. It's hosted at matrix.org/git/Ohm. That's OLM. The reason for that is that if we hosted it on GitHub, we would technically be re-exporting it from here in beautiful England to the US, at which point we then become liable to all sorts of exciting cryptography export compliance regulations that Uncle Sam imposes. So in terms of paperwork, it's way easier for us to keep it in the UK. And if you want to go and then use it in whatever country people happen to be based in, then it's up to you. Ohm is there. Everything else, however, is on GitHub, on github.com/matrix-org. And that's where you can run a server like Synapse, which is our Python reference implementation. We're currently working on the Golang rewrite of Synapse, which was originally called Dendron, but is about to be reborn with a much better and exciting name, but I can't possibly mention it yet because it's a surprise. And you also have Riot, which is the flagship Matrix client, available on iOS and Android and web. We've also just about to release an Electron desktop build of it, probably later today, depending on when I get off the call. We also have SDKs for iOS and Android and the web, React, Angular. There are also third-party SDKs and bots and bridges and libraries and integrations, and basically an entire ecosystem now of folks who are writing various different bits on top of it. So please come and hang out on matrix.org or hashmatrix:/matrix.org is the main room where everybody hangs out. And the easiest way to get to that is to go to Riot, which is riot.im. Used to be called Vector, and it's, as I say, the kind of Slack-style interface to get you into Matrix, and acts as this weird, decentralized, end-to-end encrypted Slack alternative. And it's all, again, Apache licensed, open source. And in fact, everything that we're doing on Matrix is Apache licensed and open source.
Cool. Yeah, you guys have come a long way since, I don't know, probably the first time I saw this, which was probably a year, 18 months ago. There's been a lot of improvements in the UX side of things.
Yeah, we've gone through a lot of iterations on Riot to try to get the UX to start to compete with Slack. Honestly, there's still a way to go there, but it's certainly better than it was, which isn't saying much, because it started off as a terrible, ugly proof of concept that I did on a cow train going from Palo Alto to San Francisco, and we didn't have a user interface for Matrix at that point, so I did a horrible Angular app that barely worked, which then continued for the next 18 months until we killed it, replaced it with Riot, or Vector as it was. And since then, there have probably been 3 major redesigns, and we have another one in the works right now, which should really take it to the next level.
I do got one more question for you. Have you guys done anything for, let's say, just for the sake of argument, I wanted to deploy this at FreeSWITCH.org, and we have our own LDAP compliant server. Have you guys done something for that, for single sign-ons for enterprise clients where they have their own LDAP or some kind of directory service that they want to feed into Matrix for users?
Yeah, absolutely. So LDAP was actually contributed from the community by a chap with the IRC Nick of Hexa, who runs a hackerspace in Germany, in Darmstadt. And it works well. Lots of people are using it. We have SAML authentication that was contributed by Ericsson, and we have CAS authentication that was contributed by OpenMarket, which is the company whose offices we hide in and we lurk in here in London. And the auth system is now modular. It didn't used to be, but in the last couple of months, the LDAP stuff got factored out to be a separate Python library for Synapse, and all the other stuff, pardon me, has become modular too. So it really should be increasingly friendly for an enterprise audience. So combined with the end-to-end encryption, which is compliance friendly if needed, and the enterprise auth and enterprise federation controls in order to lock the information to your specific server or set of servers, hopefully it's starting to become really quite a compelling solution for Slack-style collaboration, or indeed voice and video calling or conferencing thanks to the FreeSWITCH backend.
Cool. Yeah. With FreeSWITCH, I just got one more question. We're getting close to time here, and what? How much usage are you guys seeing on the video and voice collaboration with FreeSWITCH from a Matrix perspective?
That's a very good question. Honestly, we haven't yet done the CDR stuff to actually generate sensible CDRs out of the traffic going through Matrix. I guess I could look at the CDRs that FreeSWITCH itself is presumably emitting somewhere, but I'm just going to go and look at the monitoring graphs quickly for that host to see how much CPU it's chewing. And honestly, it's not. I'm not seeing a huge amount of CPU on there. It's like 200-300% cores on the 24-core box, so 3 out of 24 cores happening on spikes here and then. So I'll need to go and look at the actual minutes logs on it, but at the moment it's not looking that huge. Most people are using it as a IRC client, honestly, to bridge through into IRC or to bridge into Slack or HipChat or other tools like that. And the kind of folks who are coming at it from a chat perspective are also less interested in certainly multi-way calling. We know there are lots of people using it for one-to-one calling, for typically calling their other halves or doing sort of business calls, but we haven't seen much uptake on the conferencing yet. But I'll do the stats and I'll let you guys know, because obviously it's backed by a FreeSWITCH, and I'm sure it'll be useful for you to know what the kinds of usage has been like.
Yeah, that'll be real interesting. I know Tony's been working on some new stuff for the conferencing, so that'll be when he's ready to announce that stuff. That'll be really cool. So maybe that's some more stuff you guys can look at. But it's really cool. It's really good to see more projects using FreeSWITCH as part of their project. So Matrix is several bits, and there's a lot of underlying stuff in there with things like LiveOhm and FreeSWITCH underneath, and then having it all put together and see it come out to a nice product is, a really good thing to see out there. So any last plugs you want to get in, Matthew?
I'm trying to think. Possibly coming soon might be interesting. So a lot of work happening on threading at the moment, so that we can bridge through into email and news group and Reddit and Hacker News and forums and all this. And that will change Matrix enormously, in that it will no longer just be instant messaging, but will really be.
I think we're getting some bad bandwidth from you there for a minute. Let's see if I can make an adjustment there. Try that again, Matthew.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me turn off. I've had a screen share running in the background. Let me go and just kill that, perhaps, and see if that helps.
Yeah, I killed it.
That would be the improvement that we saw then. Am I coming through okay now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, sorry about that. I was just saying that coming soon is threading, which could be quite interesting. So it's bridging through to email, bridging to message boards, to news groups, and it will change the experience of Matrix enormously, in that it will no longer just be instant messaging and VoIP. It will be all of these email style and bulletin board style use cases as well, which should hopefully be quite exciting. We have, as I said, a redesign in the works. The beta, end-to-end encryption is in beta right now, but we obviously are going to be taking it out of beta probably at the beginning of 2017, hopefully, if we've solved all of the key management problems we were talking about earlier. And finally, what else have we got? Just lots of new bridges coming in and integrations. There's a Twitter bridge, which is just launching as we speak. There is a Slack webhooks bridge, which is also being rolled out. And we're trying to really build an ecosystem where people can quickly put together new bots and bridges and integrations, and we'll go and host them for the community, and everybody can go wild, going and basically making Matrix the kind of Linux open source alternative to the Slack ecosystem that so many other people have got sucked into.
Cool. Well, all right, guys. Matthew, thanks for coming out today. And for you guys that want to follow up, check out the links below. We'll post a few of the links of the things that Matthew's been talking about today. Or you can just go to matrix.org and check that out. Kathleen, do you have anything to get out there before we bail out of here for the day?
I believe that's it. Again, register for ClueCon, get that in early. That's a great help to us. And then, actually, yes, if you would like to see anything demoed, if you have any questions about FreeSWITCH or anything like that, please shoot us an email at marketing@cluecon.com, and we will try and see if we can get some great demos going for you, and that way you can kind of get your questions answered and also see a great video with one of the developers who've actually written the code, doing some good demos for you. And then like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. That's where all our great announcements are going to come from. That will keep you in the loop. And that, I think, is it for me, Ken.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Kathleen. Again, thank you very much. You guys go check out Matthew's work at matrix.org. Check out all the new stuff from FreeSWITCH at freeswitch.org. And like Kathleen said, follow us on all the good social media stuff. We'll be back here next week showing off some really cool stuff at noon Central U.S. time, right here at cantina.freeswitch.org/VC, and call into 888. Thanks, guys, and have a great week.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, or visit us online. Please follow the FreeSWITCH team on Twitter and Facebook by visiting our site at freeswitch.org.